Guys, Theory and Theology, what is up? I'm outside here on this sunny Friday, podcasting, kind of chilling in a little sunny spot. Hopefully, all the city traffic isn't going to be bad in the background. Taking a little creative break here. Wanted to talk some about African traditionalists, just kind of a brief overview of some stuff. I realize I don't really talk about it too much. I can't say that I practice anything actively daily. I have a lot of uh I find it to be important, and I find a lot of value in some specific African traditionalist cultures. As far as like the religion and spirituality, that's kind of what interests me. And I'll get into talking about something that I watched on YouTube. It was by this channel called, I think it was called Cruise. It's similar to Jubilee, but I think mostly they interview different African groups. At least that's what it seems like they're doing with their recent videos. And there was one where they had Christians, and I believe most of the people were from Nigeria, or and traditionalists. So traditionalists, they're not only African, like they can come in all kind of cultures, from South America, Central America, Asian cultures, European cultures. Um, I've talked a bit on this podcast about paganism, and I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying I want to talk about it because I realized I haven't really talked about it, and it's something that is it's something I have some firsthand experience with in my own life, and it's kind of interesting how I just don't talk about it. Even though I come from like a specific uh, traditional culture, but that culture in my grandparents' generation got converted to Christian Adventist Protestants. But thank you, motorcycle or whatever kind of car that was. You can still see, like, I still notice even in my family some of the traditions that the Adventism and Christianity didn't really wash off, or didn't really take out. And so I want to talk about those, but I also want to talk about this video. If I sound like I'm rushing, it's because I am, because I got a meeting at 2 and it's 1:12 p.m. right now. I'm just trying to get out a recording. I'm probably going to be blogging about this. I'm behind on another blog that I started on the weekend before freaking the weekend before Valentine's Day. Um, I recorded about it. I recorded an episode about relationships and things like that, and I think dating and kind of along that realm. And I kind of wanted to continue that discussion, but I haven't finished the post. So I want to finish that post and then put in some info for this current post that I want to write, kind of expanding on these ideas more. Um, so let's get into it, because that is a lengthy intro. Let's see. So as far as my notes, let me see what I got going on here. So I think I took screenshots of the questions. So the questions were, oh, please show. If these screenshots don't show, it's gonna make this a little rough. Um, okay, one question was, there's only one true religion. And then the next question, we all worship the same God but in different forms. The next question, African traditional religion encourages ritual killings, which is bad. And then the next question, I believe the opposing side is evil. And so these four questions were posed to a group of four Christians and four traditionalists. Now, the traditionalists, I don't believe they were all the same type of traditionalists. And I'll have to get the names for the blog post out. And if I can find it for the podcast post, I'll put them up. But I'll try and find it for the blog post. Um, for the Christians, I think they were Protestant Christians. I don't know if they were all the same denominations. I didn't really get those details. But they had different views. I'm not going to talk much about the Christian side because I feel like they kind of gave answers that were very cliche um, for everything. I feel like most Christian believers, when you talk to them, and especially when you're not even talking about like Islam or Judaism, you're talking about something like Buddhism, Hinduism, something traditional. A lot of times Christianity kind of sees these other belief systems as evil, as wrong, as, you know, something related to demonic realms, something related to um mm, like idol worship, but and something related to like something that the Bible said don't do it. Um but I was kind of interested because I kind of noticed that the viewpoints that some of the Christians had weren't really they weren't really seeing some of the perspective, which I kind of was noticing. I was like, wow, that's kind of a deeper approach, especially when it came to like ritual killings and things like that, because it's like we'll get into that, but I mean, that was the part that was probably the most interesting to me. So, all right, the first question that they asked was, or the first statement was, there is only one true religion. Now, I think in that statement, the important detail is the one true. Now, most religions kind of say this is the one way to do this. Now, the thing that I kind of like and admire about traditional groups, traditional religions, is um, seeing that with traditional groups, you even see this in paganism, a lot of times it's based on your heritage. So that's something to note that, a person's heritage is what's going to determine, you know, if they're going to be part of that specific tradition. Like the one man who was Igbo, Nigerian, it's for his people, it's from his lineage, it's from his tribal group. And so, some other outside person, I mean, can you convert? I don't know. Maybe. I don't really know for sure, but I'm thinking I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark guessing here that if you wanted to convert, you'd probably be able to like marry in. Like if you married somebody of a different tribe, like if an Igbo marries a Shona person, and say a traditionalist Igbo man marries a Shona wife, I mean, I would assume that even if she was Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever she was practicing before, if she had her own traditions, um, maybe start, she could maybe start practicing those Igbo traditions, possibly, possibly. I don't really know if that's how it works. Like maybe you're still excluded, but I would just assume that, if you're married and say you're raising kids, how would that even work if you're like two different religions and like having one religion saying like there's one true right religion and all the other ones are false? I mean, people think that about their own religion's going to be right, everybody else's religion's going to be wrong. But that's one thing I like about traditionalist religions, especially the ones, it's just my own opinion that I like that aspect of thinking like, oh, you're kind of born into this. Kind of like Judaism. It's like if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. It's like, yeah, you can convert into Judaism, but you still kind of have that like tribal lineage. I really like that. Because everybody technically has some kind of tribal lineage where they had some traditional religion. You might not know what it is or what it was called. Your family may have never talked to you about it, especially if they're atheist or agnostic or just not practicing any kind of thing. Or if they have somewhere down the line somebody converted people to like one of these mainstream religions, you might have no knowledge of what your ancient, great grandparents, great great grandparents, what they were actually practicing. But, when you think about the spread of a lot of these mainstream religions nowadays, they're kind of more widespread. There's a louder voice for and a lot of representation for a lot of these groups, but you got to think about the fact that almost everybody's heritage, unless you were Jewish, almost everybody's heritage comes from some other traditionalist religion or traditionalist background where maybe they weren't religious or practicing some spiritual thing, but their uh, tribe or their culture was probably, there were people in there that were practicing something based on their actual like ethnic or tribal group. Even like Ireland and Germany and like all these other places. Like, but you know, it's kind of been like the surface of things now. Like you only really see the mainstream phases of religions. It just shows how they've conquered and infiltrated a lot of political systems and everything. But you still see these pieces of things, which is what I want to write more about and talk more about. But you still see these pieces of things popping up where it's like, that didn't come from the Bible, that's not, or maybe it did, but it's like some ancient Middle Eastern or African tradition. And it's like, we're here, I'm in the Western world in America, and it's like, when I read things about like, you know, sacrifice, I was reading something the other day about this debate about, I'm not going to get into the debate, but this debate about the Eucharist, about communion, about the body and blood of Jesus, and how much of a controversy that was for the Jewish people at that time. In the book of John, there were a lot of his followers were like, I can't accept you talking about like eating my body and this kind of thing. And it's like, you know, the transubstantiation of things, when the Catholic Church talks about it, that's kind of different. Or even like talking about this is my blood, and like blood in Jewish culture, you don't drink blood. You don't drink blood of humans. You don't drink blood of animals. It's forbidden. And so for a human to be like drink my blood and eat my flesh kind of thing is like, that's not a very American thing to say. That comes from some other culture. And even Jesus saying it in the Bible, that comes from some ancient tribal rituals that Jewish people did not practice. But there are people in, those traditional societies that practice, these different types of like sacrifice and offerings and like those types of things. I don't know exactly how it looks. Like, we all know that there are tribes out there that practice some type of, cannibalism or ritual cannibalism and things like that. I mean, these are really taboo subjects, like I joke about them with my friends and stuff, but I mean, like, we don't have that here in the US. Like, and if people are doing those kind of things, it's hidden, or it's some kind of like weird situation where there's like a serial killer doing it. It's not like, you know, it's not like a mainstream religious idea where people are like comfortable with like killing, even killing animals. Like, most of us Americans who don't live on farms or don't live in rural areas or off the grid, who have never had to slaughter an animal before for our own meat, like, we live in this sanitized world where it's like we just go buy something. Um, but we'll get into that. Um, that's kind of the main thing I really wanted to focus on. Um, we all worship the same God, but in different forms. Some people would say yes, some people would say no, obviously. Um, that's a big debate in a lot of religions. Like, I think a lot of religions see that there's a lot of patterns of like love, and like community and like peace and respect and things. There are religions or spiritual cultures that don't really do that, from what I heard, and this might be clouded by some European viewpoints, but I did hear that there were some groups that practiced more of like killing other tribes and stuff, and were like pretty violent. Um, but the only time I heard about that were through books where people were talking about, like, maybe there were white settlers who, the kid got kidnapped, the sons or whoever got kidnapped, and were like invited into the tribe, and would talk about how these people would go raiding other people and like, you know, uh trying to kidnap kids, or like killing other people of different tribes, or like torturing one person or whatever, and this is still from like a white or European lens of somebody who got kidnapped into that culture. And like, was there some other like underlying reason behind it, like why they did it, or did they have some reason why they were doing it? There was never an explanation. And then there was this other movie, I think, about Mormons who came across it was on Netflix, and they came across this tribe who, I think, they believed in a god called Wagongi or Wogongi or something like that. And I don't know if they were like in the Amazon or somewhere in North America. And this tribe, um, it was like some indigenous like group to one of the Americas, and I guess their god was kind of like enforcing like killing and things like that. And they would go raid and kill other tribes a lot. But it's like, seeing it from like a Mormon perspective, or like a white seller's perspective of someone who got kidnapped, I mean, that's not like a full story. I don't know, like, were these tribal people doing it because they felt like they would gain power from the people they killed, or maybe it was revenge, or maybe it was protection, or maybe it was resources, maybe it was a practical basic thing, or was it like clear, just a basic like, we practice hatred and killing and have like lack of morals and we're just greedy? I don't really think that's what it was, but I think that's the perspective that the Mormons or the white settlers kind of took. So I've heard the stories through those types of lenses, but I haven't heard the stories from the actual groups of people where they're like, oh, well, this is the background of why we do that, like why we justify it. I mean, Christians had crusades and things, it's like, because they thought that they were right, and they thought that their God said to spread this message and go kill all these people and if they don't convert and stuff. It's like, that's, I don't know, like, what's the difference, what's the difference? Like, there's still people killing all these other people. Like, to me, it doesn't seem justified just because, you know, I don't know. It's hard to really tell because, you know, people think they're right when they're doing those things. Um, Let me see. So the question about, I believe the opposing side is evil. That was the last question that came up. That was an interesting question. To believe that the opposing side is evil is like, wow. Um, their beliefs are evil or their practices are evil. I don't know. But that's a different question for another time. You can watch the video. I'll post it, and you can see the whole thing. I don't want to go into all the details. There was a lot of arguing and bickering and people interrupting each other. The subtitles were very helpful. Uh, there's a lot of language that's used that's like terminology that I don't know, and there was a little bit of back and forth between English and other languages, and so it wasn't always like the most clear, but it was clear enough to be able to read what people were saying. And if you're interested in this topic, I thought it was pretty enlightening to kind of get viewpoints from traditionalists, especially African traditionalists. You don't usually hear much from them. In general, unless you seek it out, you don't really hear much from traditionalist religions and spiritual groups in general. You don't really hear much from them, from these groups who have like these tribal spiritual practices. They're pretty quiet. They're not trying to convert people. They're not really like, they just kind of do their rituals and go do their thing in their space and practice. It's more of a private thing. And, you know, within their culture, like they'll do it, but, you know, they're not really trying to like have some kind of like big campaign to like get people on board. It's like they just do their thing because they think it's right and good for them, and that's what they want to practice. They don't really they don't really believe that um I don't know, they just do what's best for them. They're not really too concerned with like, you know, other people joining and like getting the most numbers and like proving who's right more than someone else. They're more concerned with actually practicing their religion and not really trying to prove or disprove other people. Um so let me see. When it comes to the question of, let me read the question exactly as it is, the one I want to focus on that I already kind of went into. African traditional religion encourages ritual killings, which is bad. Um, when they talk about ritual killings, they talk about an example. If a king dies, then, you know, or if they're gonna die, they might need to sacrifice 7 virgins. And so, if you don't want to be sacrificed, technically you got to stay indoors. So like people aren't like breaking into houses, it doesn't sound like, but it sounds like, you know, if you're found like out on the street or something, somebody might attack you or take your life. Um, you know, and once they get the 7, then, you know, they're kind of, that's kind of the number they need. They made this point, you know, one of the traditionalists made this point saying, um, you know, if somebody is willingly offering themselves for a sacrifice, what's wrong in that, you know? And that's a valid point, because, you know, it's one thing if like you're coming home from school late, or you have some reason like you're walking to your, there's a doctor that lives like a couple, you know, streets down or whatever, and you're in some kind of pain or need some kind of help from some family member who lives walking distance, and you just happen to be a virgin walking the street and get killed outside of your own will. That's different. But it was interesting to me that the Christians were very upset about ritual killings. And I started thinking about, okay, do they not see that Jesus, you know, in Jesus' perspective, gave himself as a sacrifice, right? And was sacrificed on the cross as an offering for the sins of everyone. I mean, they started making the point, well, it's one sacrifice for all. And it's not like they continue doing these sacrifices. It's not like they're sacrificing more and more people, but it still is a sacrifice. And I think, for the Christians to try to justify, oh, well, we say that Jesus did it and it was once, how is that any better? I mean, I'm not saying people need to be killed more, but how is that really any better? If it's like, okay, this guy died for the sins of the world willingly, he willingly did it. Um, it sounds like, of course, there's probably fear and pain and torture, and, just it wasn't an ideal experience by any sense. Crucifixion is a form of torture. It's not, and he wasn't the only person who ever got crucified. A lot of, I think, people who were major names in the New Testament, when you follow their histories out, a lot of them got crucified, or some of the other people got crucified later on in different ways. Like some of them got crucified upside down and stuff. because they were saying, I don't want to get crucified like Jesus, so crucify me like this or do it like this or whatever. I don't think they were being killed for like a sacrifice. I think they were being killed out of some other reason, either by political reason or like by the church or something. I don't really know the exact history, but quite a lot of people got crucified that were followers of Jesus, like after the fact, at least according to some of the church history that I've read. But they weren't considered sacrifices, I don't think. Um, I hear the term martyr. You hear that term in Christianity, like in early Christianity. You hear that with people who got killed, they're a martyr, or they got martyred. And you hear that in, like, I've only heard it in extremist Islam. I don't really know if mainstream Islam uses words like, got martyred. I don't really understand it, so I don't even want to like place words into people's mouths. But those are the situations where I've kind of heard about martyrs, martyrdom. It sounds like it's not their will, but they know that they're doing, they feel like they're doing the will of, like, a spiritual will, and that path led them to get martyred because of the messages or the work that they were doing that they felt was good work, um, to help people in whatever way they were helping, and somebody else viewed it as a threat or wrong or evil or illegal and killed them for it. And then that's how a person becomes a martyr. They're kind of like, it's kind of like honored. It's like honored. They got killed, but they're kind of honored for it, for having taken on death, for doing what they felt like was right. But I would also say I don't know if people consider those people to be like sacrifices or um a ritual killing. It's not like a ritual. It's more like they got attacked and killed kind of thing. I don't think it's considered a ritual. It's more like a punishment, I guess you would say. But ritual killings, I mean, I struggle to see the difference between, you know, the crucifixion of Jesus, just with the terminology around it. Like, I mean, yes, Jesus was killed for, you know, political reasons and, religious egos and jealousy. There were people who wanted him dead. It wasn't like, but then within that process, he was also, you know, being a sacrificial lamb. And interestingly enough, the the parsha for this week um, in the book of Exodus, for people who follow the Jewish parsha, it's teruma, and that's offerings. And there is a portion in there about offerings. Like, there's later on, I want to say it's in Leviticus where there's a lot more information about that, but there's a portion that talks about like animals getting killed as like an offering. And it's just interesting how it's like, usually, yeah, there are animals get killed. People don't really look at that too much and be like, okay, like, you're killing an animal for a ritual, okay. But when someone's killing a person for a ritual, it becomes a whole other problem. Uh, but if somebody wants to get killed as a for a ritual, for whatever reason, I mean, I'm that's not part of a culture that I'm so familiar with, but it sounds like people have justified reasons for wanting to have their lives taken in that way, either for their family, or there's some blessing attached to it, or there's some kind of something that they believe strongly will happen positively with their death, like something good will come from it. From a spiritual realm, there's going to be some kind of either protection or something for the people left, that for why they got, ritually killed. um I've never seen ritual killings or known about any of them that happen in the US, really. um but it sounds like it's common enough in some places. It's maybe just a taboo topic and nobody talks about it. I don't know how to find out more about that, but I mean, I know about it from like animals, like, I know even culturally where, when people in, my non-American culture, when they get married, sometimes there's a goat, they get slaughtered, or like, animals get slaughtered for certain reasons, or they get purchased for the slaughter, and that's still part of a ritual, but I've never seen it with humans. Um, One lady who's Christian, I think she kind of mentioned from her biased perspective that she thought it was wrong for people to kind of, I don't know what the word is, to put like to exchange. It's some kind of an exchange. I think it's in with traditionalists that there can be some kind of exchange. You go to some kind of person for like, I want this kind of fortune, or I want this kind of money, but with that comes death attached to it at a certain time. It's like if you ask for that kind of wealth from whoever it is that's providing that. I don't know if it's physical money, or if it's like a, someone does some kind of prayer or reaches out to some kind of spiritual entity that's like trying to like, on this human person's behalf who's requesting this wealth or money or fortune, they're exchanging that for death. um I don't think it's like immediate death. It's not like you get the money and then they kill you. I think it's like you get the money and then, or you get like fortune. I don't really know how to explain it because I'm getting tired, but I mean, it's like you get a fortune, you get the money, um and then um I don't know how to explain it. Like you get the money, or you get the blessing, or the, is it a blessing? Is that what it's called? Like I would assume you go to a certain person that could offer you this type of a service, but I don't think it's like a mafia thing where it's like you put on a hit on somebody, and then it's not like that. Like I think it comes from some spiritual place, and it's not like immediate like a cash loan. I don't think it's like that. I think it's like you ask for it, but then in exchange you're risking part of your life, your lifespan. Like you might die earlier because it comes at a cost to like request for fortune and like wealth in that manner. She was not happy with that. This one lady was not happy with that um as an option. I don't know much about that, so I don't even feel too comfortable talking about it because I don't want to make things sound bad when I don't know anything about them. I think people can have good intentions regardless of where they're from or what they're doing. And people do what they feel works for them and what they feel is right. I really do believe that. Christianity and all the mainstream religions don't appeal to everybody. It's not possible for everyone to be like on board about it. And so people practice stuff that, of course, these other religions they teach it's evil. But I feel like the consensual nature of certain things, yeah, if you're going around just like murdering people and that kind of thing, that's different than somebody saying I want this. It's Yes, it's taboo and it's controversial. I wouldn't want one of my family members being like, "Oh yeah, I want to be sacrificed." I'd I'd be traumatized by that. Like I love my family members, even the ones that maybe if I don't get along with certain ones of them, I still wouldn't want them to die in that way. It's like just live out your life, like don't sacrifice yourself, you know. But I mean, I'm sure it happens, or else they wouldn't be talking about it as if it's like something that happens like way, way, way in the future, or like way, way, way in the past. It's like something people don't do anymore. Mainstream America doesn't practice that. I mean, I hear of people selling their souls to the devil. That's a big thing in the entertainment industry. There's a lot of occult um, representation in the entertainment industry with like actors and um, singers. I think people don't take it seriously. They're just like, oh, it's not real. But these people literally say that they do it, like, so there's something else that's going on where it's like I've noticed, like, with Western culture and Americans and people who take on Western ideas, there is this, and Western mainstream religious kind of practices, there is this kind of idea where people think that they're better than everybody else. I do notice that a lot, not everybody, but a lot of people think my way is better, mine's the only one. My book says it's the only thing. Everyone else is evil, wrong, and bad. And that affects the way people treat each other, I think. Um, and that's something that I really don't like. I don't like to see people messed with because they're different or because they do something different. The Bible does talk about the fruits of the Spirit, and it's like that's one thing that I find very valuable to look at when I'm trying to kind of assess, okay, what is somebody doing? You know, Even if it's something I don't understand, it's like, okay, like, are they practicing, like, what is this practice, that they're doing? Um, Now, would ritual killings be considered like gentle or peaceful? I don't know. My interpretation is more like it seems like it would be more violent just because of the act of killing. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if these are topics I'm even allowed to talk about on here. I'm not like saying people should go do it, but I'm just saying, like, just as a topic for conversation sake of something that rarely gets talked about. And I don't even know what I'm going to title this episode, but it's a very interesting topic. And I think it's of value to study, different traditionalist religions and, especially because a lot of people say, it's demon possession, don't touch it, but then it's like, okay, you have someone like Bob Dylan who, or Denzel Washington, or Marilyn Monroe, or, Oprah, or a lot of these people who actively will say that they've like allowed some kind of demonology, some kind of like spirit to come into them in exchange for their soul to kind of give them that fortune and fame and like ability to act or sing or write, and they exchange it and they talk about it. I'm nobody special to find this information. It's all over the place. They're connected with the occult, and I just listed a few, like Leonardo DiCaprio. There's a bunch of these people who are like into this kind of stuff. But in Western culture, I'll still watch the movies. Like, I'll watch the movies. If Oprah's in something, I'll watch it. If Leo's in something, you better believe I'm gonna watch it. If some artists make like a song or an album or they're performing live, I'm still gonna go try to get tickets to the concert. I'm not like, oh, I can't like get anywhere near them because they're attached to the occult. But so why would people be so afraid to like study about different groups of people who practice it not for entertainment or money or fortune or fame? You know, it's just kind of a weird difference where it's like it's easy to label people from American eyes. It's easy to label some other traditionalist person and be like they're doing evil and wrong. They do something that has to do with demons and all this other kind of spirits and stuff, but then everybody's praising Hollywood and like going to the big screen and going to all these concerts and festivals and stuff. And nobody's like, oh, well, these people are involved in the occult, so I'm not going to consume their content. Most people will not say that. Most people won't avoid that, but they'll avoid learning about people who practice it, from other countries or other cultures. But we actively have people in our American culture that are doing these things, but they're stars, and we like to be entertained. Americans, we love our entertainment. We are big on entertainment, and we're good at it, and we like big, better things, and consume, consume, consume. And I think it's like, okay, well, why is that right? Why is that acceptable? I'm not trying to judge it. I'm just making a point that like everyone just looks the other way when it's that kind of stuff. You know, nobody's shaming Oprah, nobody's shaming all these other people. But, if a Christian, an American Christian, gets in front of a traditionalist who's talking about some kind of ritual that they're doing, even if it's not ritual killings, if it's like some other kind of ritual, like some kind of dancing ritual, and then they're saying like, oh, like we're like asking prayers from our ancestors and like praying to our ancestors and worshiping them or venerating them and things like that, and then all of a sudden that's evil and wrong and bad. But Bob Dylan and Oprah can, sell their soul to the devil, and that's not a problem. It's like, I don't know. It's kind of these weird double standards, like I feel like people don't see it and then they don't want to believe it, and then they're like, oh, but it's not the same thing. It's like, it is the same thing. If you're going to say that, you can't learn or delve into that because there's devils involved or demons involved, it's like, well, these people, we actively watch all their stuff, you know. Like Hollywood is very involved in the occult. It's very much, there's so much occult representation. It's like, not even funny. Even the award shows, they're like set up in a certain stage that looks like these certain like other types of ceremonies and things like that. Um, it's just fascinating though how people will justify, they'll justify what they do, and what they do is considered better, and then they don't acknowledge what others do as valid, and what everyone else does is considered evil. I don't know. I can have a problem with that sometimes, but I gotta get offline because I got a meeting in like 9 minutes. But we will continue this kind of conversation.